X marks the spot. Hey guys, I'm Joe, and I'm finally back after about a week or so to bring you my thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse. Little warning, just like with some of the others, like Captain America Civil War or Dawn of Justice, there's going to be some spoilers in here. Not everything, but there will be some spoilers, because I feel like I can't really talk about this movie without going into detail about certain things, just like I did with the last couple of superhero movies. And I apologize for the lateness of this video, just to let you guys know right off the bat, I've been feeling a little bit down lately with social media and YouTube. These last few months, in regards to responding with people's opinions on Dawn of Justice or Civil War, it's just really been hectic, and a fellow YouTuber of mine, Matthew Aaronholt, has recently left social media, more than likely due to the stuff that I just talked about, and it just made me wonder, what is the point of this anyway? But after some time to reflect, I've actually decided, you know what? I'm gonna keep going. I'm not going anywhere, guys. So, let's talk about X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is set about 10 years later after the events of Days of Future Past. Charles Xavier has revived his school for gifted youngsters. Magneto is living with a family in Poland under a different name. Raven is in hiding amongst the human population after she was on the news on the White House lawn. And mutants are somewhat accepted more now these days, but there's still some people out there that aren't exactly kinder towards mutants. And things get a little haywire when a character named Apocalypse, who's from ancient Egypt, wakes up and decides he's going to wreak havoc on the world in order to restore balance to the universe, so to speak. Now let me give you guys a background on my history with the XMen franchise. I didn't grow up with it. Not like Spider-Man or Batman, where it's not a childhood thing with me. I recently got into the X-Men after the first teaser trailer of Days of Future Past. And having watched the X-Men movies like 1, 2, 40 minutes into X-Men 3, I'm sorry guys, I couldn't sit through it. First Class and Days of Future Past, I can safely say that I quite like the X-Men franchise. I think it has a lot of interesting themes running through it, which have been prevalent ever since its creation in 1963, about racism, prejudice, and accepting that you are who you are despite being different from other people. But my personal favorite is Days of Future Past. I have reviewed that before, like back in the day when I was starting out on my channel. Now the reason why it's my favorite, some of you probably figure, well, people I think only really like it because it changed the timeline because of what Brett Ratner did. And that is true, it definitely fixes the franchise, and that's a huge plus. But the reason why I like it is because it touches on the idea of hope, someone who's lost, and just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean they're lost forever. And the character journey that Charles Xavier goes through with the help of Logan, played by Hugh Jackman, it touches me somewhere because I've been in places like that before in my life where I don't really feel like I can go on. What's the purpose of doing what I do anymore? Like I said, with YouTube, or even other things in life with like my job and my family. That's why it's my personal favorite, and I think it's one of the best superhero movies we've had in the last few years. And Bryan Singer still proves that he makes good X-Men movies, as far as that's concerned, and X-Men 1 and 2. And when he was announced he was coming back for X-Men Apocalypse, I just said, awesome. Let's go for it. And before this movie came out, this movie was getting crapped on. I mean, what? Look at the Rotten Tomatoes score. I'm pretty sure it's in like the high 40s, low 50s or something like that last time I checked. Normally, I don't go with Rotten Tomatoes. I have a rocky relationship with them. I went into this movie just going, okay, this isn't going to be Days of Future Past. It's Bryan Singer. He might be able to make something good out of it. I try to approach it as objectively as I can, but I also want to play by its terms. I'm going to watch it and try to have fun. And what do you know? I think it's a pretty good movie, but not a great movie, though. It's not going to rank in the best superhero movies of all time. It might not rank in my best movies of the year, but I could safely say I can see myself watching this again because there's a lot of good stuff in here. First of all, the characters and actors. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender continue to impress as Charles Xavier and Magneto. That whole dynamic of their rivalry/friendship is so well realized in this series, especially with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. And the scene when Magneto loses his family in the forest after he uses his powers to save somebody in this mill that he works in. I mean, was that Scarlet Witch? Maybe so. I don't know. But when she starts freaking out and letting all these birds go loose, one of those cops accidentally lets the arrow go. And when that happened, I just went, oh no. And kills both his daughter and his wife. Michael Fassbender sells the hell out of that scene in particular. So great. And yeah, He's one of my favorite actors working right now. He puts 110% effort into every character he plays, even if the movie itself is not that great. I really like Magneto because he's someone that you can really understand where he's coming from as a villain. Not just in these movies, but I think in X-Men as a whole. I'm not too familiar with X-Men outside of the movies, but if you've seen the other X-Men movies and you see this intense hatred he has towards humans, he's one of those villains where you just go, I definitely see why you're doing this, but you can't do this. This is wrong. You're killing people. It's not the way to handle your problems. And both McKellen and Fassbender are terrific casting choices. And again, Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy as Xavier, they both knock it out of the park in these movies, especially McAvoy, particularly with Days of Future Past. He's not on board with the prejudice against mutants, but he wants to handle it in a peaceful manner, and people have pointed this out. He's the Martin Luther King Jr. to mutants, like Magneto is to Malcolm X. With his use of violence, they both want the same thing, but they're on polar opposite sides of the coin. But you also got other characters in here like Mystique, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Storm, and Apocalypse. We'll get to him later. And Nightcrawler even. And speaking of Nightcrawler, he was a ton of fun. The kid, Cody Smit-McPhee, who you might recognize from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, he was Jason Clarke's kid in that movie. He was a lot of fun, and he was very funny, had a lot of great moments in here, and I love the ability he has to teleport. It's so great. And I like how they're not afraid to show his devout Catholicism. Hollywood is very anti-Christian, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I appreciate how unapologetic they are in showing how devoutly religious he is. When you see him praying on the helicopter, Heavenly Father, please help me seize the light and to help my friends. Spot on German accent there. And I do wonder, does Mystique know that he's her son? Because I've heard that they are related. Who knows? Speaking of Mystique, one complaint that I've been hearing a lot is that Jennifer Lawrence was phoning it in. She wasn't great in the movie, but I thought she was fine. She wasn't bad. I mean, I thought she handled herself fine. I think she had the most emotional weight in Days of Future Past with her psychological struggle with Charles. It's kind of the same here as it was in First Class as far as her character goes. If you're one of those people who doesn't like her because of her certain viewpoints on things in her real life and the way she acts off screen, you really need to develop a better sense of patience. Seriously. And you guys know how much I'm a fan of Jennifer Lawrence, and almost to a fault. But putting all that aside, or at least keeping it in control, I thought she was fine. I didn't think she was phoning it in. And you have other characters like Cyclops, who actually gets a little bit of a chance to shine here. Ty Sheridan, I think, is really good. You feel for this guy and try not to let the rays come out of his eyes, especially in that scene where he just lets it all out when that bully tries to antagonize him in the bathroom. And you also got Jean Grey, played by Sophie Turner, who really gets a chance to shine here. She's afraid of what she's capable of. She's an outsider. Nobody really knows how to respond to her with her telekinetic powers. And the scene at the final climactic battle where Xavier tells her, Jean, help me. And she just goes, and the Phoenix symbol comes out. Wow, that was cool. And hopefully Sophie Turner comes back as Jean Grey in the next X-Men movie, if they're going to make a new X-Men movie. And I have to say, before I forget, Quicksilver saving all those people in Xavier's mansion with Annie Lennox. Nailed it. Nailed it. And since I talked about people complaining about Jennifer Lawrence, let's talk about something that a lot of other people are complaining about. Yeah, bub. Wolverine was in this movie, in the Weapon X sequence, where Jean, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler go to save Charles and Mystique, and Hank McCoy, which, by the way, Nicholas Holt's also really good as Beast too. People are saying that he was shoehorned in and unnecessary. Maybe so, but I kind of figured he was coming back anyway. And it's not like he's in the movie the entire time. And seeing that spot in the trailer where Wolverine just pops the claws out, where you just see his hand just go, whoosh, I actually got excited. I just went, oh, that's cool. And I was wondering, how's he going to get introduced into this movie? Colonel Stryker comes in and takes away Xavier, Mystique, and the others, and Quicksilver also, to his hideout in the mountains where the Weapon X program is happening. And I just went, that reminds me of X-Men 2. Wait a second, is Wolverine in there? And when Jean, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler get to that cage, you can hear the whole and it's Hugh Jackman himself for an extended cameo. Awesome, right? Again, I can't resist. What, because you're from the future? No. Because of these. You know, these are getting a little tiring holding these in your hands. They're butter knives, by the way. Is it fan service? Yeah. Was it a bad thing? Maybe for some people. But me? What the heck? I like Hugh Jackman. He's great as Wolverine, and I was pleasantly serviced. And since Bryan Singer is coming back to direct this, he brings a lot of good energy into this franchise again. It's more lighthearted, more energetic than the other X-Men movies. It's the most comic book inspired X-Men movie to this day. I mean, you saw a little bit of that in Days of Future Past, but it was blended in with the future, with the original trilogy, which had a more darker and serious vibe. This movie does take itself seriously, but it's more brightly colored to fit into the 1980s setting that they're in, which, by the way, I like the whole Return of the Jedi thing. I thought that was kind of cool, but I disagree that it was the worst. No, it wasn't. It's my favorite. Moving on. And the action I thought was pretty spot on too, especially with Quicksilver's scene and the Weapon X sequence. I thought that was really cool too. And the final climactic battle I thought was pretty good too, like with the fight scene with Apocalypse and Quicksilver, and the whole mental battle that Charles Xavier and Apocalypse have going on inside their heads, which I like how they explained how he went bald because of his body transfer from one body to another. I thought that was a clever way of doing it. Having seen the other X-Men movies that Bryan Singer has directed, he still continues to show that he's not afraid to have fun, but he's willing to keep it in line with what the X-Men are all about. That being said though, there are parts of this movie that aren't great. Let's talk about Apocalypse. This is something that a lot of people are very iffy about, and I myself am a little bit split on this character. Oscar Isaac is a great actor. From what I've seen of him in other movies like Force Awakens, I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of screen time in that movie, but he was good. Ex Machina, I wasn't a huge fan of that movie personally. I appreciated the ideas they were trying to go for, even though I wasn't really crazy about it, but he was really good in the role that he was playing. And here, his motivations I felt were a little bit too easy, I guess, because he wakes up in the present day, 1983, in Egypt, and Storm helps him seek shelter in this building, and he touches this TV, which he has no idea what it is, because he's from ancient Egypt, and he gets a glimpse of all the past historical events of, like, war and violence and riots and all that stuff. It's the same kind of thing that we saw in Age of Ultron, where Ultron sees all this chaos and destruction go on throughout history and decides that humanity is beyond saving. It's the same kind of tired villain plot that we've seen a million times, but you do kind of understand why he's doing it, so I wasn't that bothered by it. But at the same time, I just went, you could do something a little bit better than that, though. Not saying get rid of it completely, but maybe add on top of that instead. Maybe go into his past, like why he feels alienated because he's the first mutant. Maybe there's something there that he feels a little bit burdened by. He was the first ever mutant, so people are obviously not going to take this guy in because of the way he looks. That being said, though, I thought Oscar Isaac was pretty menacing as Apocalypse. The voice he had, the way he delivered his lines, and the dialogue that he would express, and how he used Magneto's pain as a way to recruit him under his wing with the Four Horsemen. It was very, very terrifying in a lot of ways, and the powers that he's able to do, like put somebody into a wall and kill them like in a quicksand-like manner. Ooh, man. I would not want to cross this guy. And people have complained that he looks like Ivan Ooze from the Power Rangers. Seriously, guys, get over yourselves, man. Jeez. If you're not a fan of Apocalypse or his look, okay, fine, but use something a little bit better than just some typical childish complaint. Seriously, it's just so stupid. Okay, it is a little silly looking, I guess, kind of like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin look in the first Spider-Man movie. But like with Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, Oscar Isaac, once again, sells the hell out of that character. I can look past that stuff. And another thing I wish they could have touched upon was Quicksilver actually telling Magneto that he was his son, because they do hint at it in Days of Future Past. You can control metal? My mom knew a guy who can do that. I wish they actually had him tell Magneto that he was his son, because Magneto had lost his family that he was trying to rebuild his life with. And maybe that would have been a actually much more emotional anchor to try to bring him back to the good side. I felt like that would have been a lot better. But I was fine with the way it turned out in the end when he said, "I didn't betray you. I betrayed them." In the end, X-Men Apocalypse is not a great movie overall. I think it's good, and I think it's a little bit unfairly hated. And I'm not letting the Rotten Tomatoes score influence my opinion on this, because I don't think Rotten Tomatoes is really that trustworthy to begin with. I enjoy X-Men Apocalypse. It's not the best X-Men movie ever, but I could see myself watching it again, and I'm looking forward to buying it on Blu-ray when it comes out eventually. So what are your guys' thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think it was okay? Did you love it? Whatever your thoughts are, comment below, and I'll see you guys next time.